to the Fan of History. I am the Fan of History, and today we're going to talk about Assyria. This is a prayer by Tiglath-Pileser I. He praises Ashur, the god of war. And I'll relate this prayer because I think it says a lot about the Assyrians. Ashur and the great gods who have enlarged my kingdom, who have given me strength and power as my portion, commanded me to extend the territory of their country, putting into my hand their powerful weapons, the cyclone of battle. I subjugated lands and mountains, cities and the rulers, enemies of Ashur, and conquered their territories. So, let's talk about Assyria. We're going to go through 2,000 years here in no time, so it will be very, very brief, and I apologize for any mistakes, mispronunciations, etc. My Fan of History show is about to cover the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the first, or at least the greatest empire the Western world had seen by the year 612. I have already covered I will release the first show about the Neo-Assyrians on May the 12th. And by then I covered the years 1000 to 911 in the decade reports. The video shows I'm doing every week on the YouTube channel Fan of History. But now I need to tell you what happened to the Assyrians before the year 1000 BC. So let's do just that. The city of Ashur is located on the right bank of the Tigris, right there. Midway between the Greater and the Lesser Sab, there is a place near today that's called Tiglath-Pileser. And 60 miles to the north, beyond the Greater Sab, is Nineveh. And it's a city of equal age, and it's very important to the Assyrians. It lies opposite Mosul on the banks of the Tigris and Kushur in modern Iraq. This is the Assyrian Heartland. It has poor protection from invasion. It will constantly be attacked during these 2,000 years. It's a highland region. It has much better climate than the Babylonian plain. You don't need to irrigate to grow crops. You also have a lot of building stones and natural resources that the Babylonians don't have. The floodplain is empty of everything except this extremely fertile soil that gave rise to civilization earlier. But you will find that the location of Ashur is pretty good because you're close to the floodplain and you still have all these things. But it is very, very hard to defend. And the Assyrians had to be great warriors to defend this area. And they will fail at times. And they will also trade. The first archaeological traces from the site of Ashur itself is from 2500 BC. I have written sources that tell me about 3000 BC, but I think the first really interesting thing that happens is Sargon of Akkad. Sargon the Great, he rises from the city of Akkad, which is very close to Ashur, and in fact the Assyrians will assimilate Sargon, even though Sargon builds the first empire of Mesopotamia, and he conquers a lot of cities, he fights a lot of wars all his life. And he takes Ashur without looking back. But the Assyrians, as time passes after the fall of the kings of Akkad, the Assyrians will consider the Akkadians as Assyrians. The Assyrians were Sumerian from the start, and they will count themselves as Akkadian as well. So when they think about themselves, they consider Sargon their first king. And the kings of Akkad rule Ashur for over 100 years. After that, the area is dominated by the third dynasty of Ur. This happens between 2100 and 2000 BC. And as vassals of Ur is over here, down almost by the Persian Gulf, the Assyrians become great traders. They trade a lot. They have a trading colony in Kanesh, it's about here in Turkey, where they found great finds, actually. Oh, sorry. So professional. Yeah, great finds in Kanesh. And the Temple of Ashur in Ashur itself is built during this period, also its protective walls. And there is a guy called Ilusuma at 1900 BC. He is the first great king of Ashur itself. And they count him as the 32nd king of Assyria. So a lot of stuff has happened before this. As opposed to the other cities in Mesopotamia, Ashur also gets all this influence from Turkey, from the Zagros Mountains, from Iran, from north, even from the barbarians beyond the Caucasus. So it's a very multinational place. And I read somewhere that actually to be an Assyrian, in the end you just had to worship Ashur, obey the king of Assyria, and then you were an Assyrian. And that will come back and help the Assyrians later. A territorial state takes form then under the next kings. One of them is Samsi-Adad the First. He is a contemporary of Babylonia's superhero Hammurabi. And Hammurabi creates the state of Babylon, and this happens. One of his great rivals is Samsi-Adad of Assyria. And Samsi-Adad actually managed to build the first Assyrian Empire. So when we come down to the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 911, we count that as the third empire of Assyria, and this is the first one. But the first Assyrian Empire, which controlled all this area, and I doubt that this was what we think of as control. The people in this area paid tribute and were vassals to the king of Assyria. They were not governed by Assyrians on location. I don't think that infrastructure existed yet. And this empire falls after Samsi-Adad's death, and Ashur becomes just another city-state. We are in a dark age then, between 1700 and 1365 BC, where Assyria is first dominated by Babylon and then conquered by the Mitanni Empire. This is the Mitanni Empire. The Mitannis were Indo-Europeans that came from the east and took Ashur, as you can see. During this time, the Assyrians was also forced to fight for their freedom. And there is a great quote here from the book The Ancient Near East by Breasted. The Assyrian state was forced to defend its uncertain frontiers against its neighbors on both north and south. The Assyrians were toughened by the strain of unceasing war. The Assyrian state was therefore built up around the army, at first the militia, which became the chief strength of the government. This military state thus developed into a stable and powerful organization, unshaken by the rivalries of city-states, such as those which so often weakened and finally overthrew Babylonia. And in the end, the Assyrians managed to throw off their yoke and become independent again. This happens under Eriba-Adad I and his son Assur-Uballit I, who free Assyria from the Mitanni. These guys and the guys who came after them were priest kings, which is different from the era we are covering on the show. Tukulti-Ninurta I conquers Babylonia and establishes a new capital which does not last, and he names it after himself. And after Tukulti-Ninurta, the imperial system of the Middle Assyrian Empire has a lot of problems. The Bronze Age collapse is going on in 1200 BC, and Assyria feels the strain. There are environmental changes. There are also a lot of migrations. But during the reign of Tiglath-Pileser I, the guy I quoted at the beginning of the show, the empire swells again, and he is the last great king of the Middle Assyrian Empire. And when we start to look at the Assyrians in 1000 BC, they still remember Tiglath-Pileser I and the time they were great in the Middle Assyrian Empire. So what made the Assyrians different? They had a warrior ethos. They were trained to be warriors. All men were warriors, and everybody had to fight. There was a religious war duty. The king had to go to war every year. if he didn't, something was wrong. And he had this religious duty to go out, subjugate others, and take their stuff. So there was a yearly raiding thing going on. So you went somewhere, got some tribute, or raised the city, and then went back. They were also fierce hunters, and it was actually the Assyrians who managed to kill every Mesopotamian lion in Mesopotamia. So the Mesopotamian lion, which was Asian lions, which now only exist in India, were killed by the Assyrians. And the interesting thing was that the lions were only allowed to be hunted by the king, and I guess his hunting party. There is one king who manages to kill 340 lions, 120 elephants, and countless other bulls and things, and brags about it, like they brag about this poor lion here. But you must remember that during the old Assyrian Empire and the middle Assyrian Empire, we are talking about peasant armies. There is no such thing as a standing army in the world at this time. Nobody has a standing army. Nobody has the infrastructure. It's the peasant army. After they have done their peasant thing, after you have the peasant produce, you go to war. But you have to get back home every year and sort of fix the stuff and then go to war again next year. And that will carry on a long time into the Neo-Assyrian Empire as well. Well, now we are ready to take on the Neo-Assyrian Empire, so stay tuned and thank you for watching.